Here we have a flapper girl. She smokes, drinks, cuts her hair, and goes to petting parties. Now this bootlegger can either be your best friend or your worst enemy. He makes, sells, and transports alcohol illegally. The temperance movement is a social movement that is against the consumption of alcohol. The Women's Christian Temperance Union is an active organization that is committed to help the social reform of women. This organization advocated the prohibition of alcoholic beverages. Prohibition was an event that concluded in 1933. It caused selling, making, and transporting alcohol forbidden. Some named it the Noble Experiment, and its purpose was to lessen offense and scarcity rates.
What is the temperance movement?
The temperance movement of the 19th and early 20th century was an established effort in reducing the consumption of intoxicating liquors or just a press for overall sobriety.
The temperance movement began in 1830 and it had originated from people pledging to quit drinking. They had vowed not to drink, and this promise got passed around faster than anticipated.
Sir, have you been drinking?
What's it to you?
Well, I'm part of the temperance movement, and I'm here to ban alcohol forever.
Good luck with that.
Why was the temperance movement important?
It was important because throughout this time, most of the association was women, and they had seen the cynical backfires of alcohol. They considered that if they could get people to stop drinking as much or permanently, that the crime rates would decrease and so would the abuse. This being said, that if this did happen, the environment around men would become much more tolerable.
What is the Anti-Saloon League?
The Anti-Saloon League was the first association in the United States to promote prohibition in the early 1920s.
The Anti-Saloon League started in the early 20th century and worked mostly with churches that believed in fighting for prohibition. The League's main base of support was among Protestant churches in rural areas in the South. During this time, the Anti-Saloon League was very forward and would go around town doing any activities that promoted prohibition.
Why was the Anti-Saloon League important?
So the Anti-Saloon League was the most prominent group during this time, and they were important means of propaganda and very important in persuading people for the dry cause.
What was the Women's Christian Temperance Union?
The Women's Christian Temperance Union was an active sobriety organization that was amidst one of the first women groups dedicated to civic improvement.
The Women's Christian Temperance Movement started in 1874 and was commenced to improve women's labor laws, prison reform, and suffrage. The WCTU began to distance themselves from feminist groups, alternately focusing fundamentally on prohibition. The Women's Christian Temperance Organization's intent was simple: bring an end to alcohol consumption in the United States. These women believed that drinking caused problems in society. To achieve their goal, thousands of women protested bars and saloons by marching, praying, singing, and dumping alcohol. In the 1920s, poor people would go to bootleggers to get alcohol. Bootleggers were not connected to their customers and only cared about business. Cops during this time period cared more about bootleggers rather than the people buying the alcohol, and this caused the cops to go to extremes to find out information. Bootleggers would arrive at parties uninvited and try selling alcohol. Women in the 1920s liked to be flapper girls, girls that would smoke, drink, and party as much as they desired. When offered alcohol by a bootlegger, she would turn it down because she sees herself having a higher status. At the beginning of Prohibition, rich and poor bootleggers would run from the police. They would then both get caught, but rich and poor were treated differently in the legal systems. In the 20th century, rich men were allowed to pay off people to go to jail for them. They were at a higher status than some, so this act was okay to do. Towards the end of Prohibition, around 1930, people and police did not care much for Prohibition. Therefore, police would not arrest people drinking, and people would not care when police saw them drinking in the streets.
Tell me about the end of the Prohibition period.
Prohibition had finished in 1933. The 21st Amendment was established, ending Prohibition. Some states still endured Prohibition by establishing statewide temperance laws, but after the Great Depression had hit, everything ceased.